Welcome to Tomorrow Makers, where we explore how we learn, live, work, and play now and in the future. I'm Summer Beatty.
And I'm Carlos Ramos. My gosh, we learned so much today.
Oh, we did.
One of the things I really love about this podcast is I get to meet people in different fields and learn about what they do. And a lot of times I have an interest in it and want to partake in it. In this episode, we get to talk with Kerry Magro, who is doing all sorts of stuff, writing, consulting on films, all in the autism space. It's a space I'm very unfamiliar with. And I felt a little uncomfortable in asking some of the questions because I'm like, am I asking this the right way? I want to make sure that I don't think I'm offending anybody, but then again, in regular life, I don't know if I'm offending anybody, and I'm sure I am all the time. But you were, I joked that, the couple minutes that we were talking between Kerry being here and getting started with the intro, you're talking about the ASPE conference and your personal experience there. And I don't think we have to get into the level of detail that we talked about there, but I'd love for the audience to hear a little bit about your perspective there.
Okay, so it's the Transitions Conference.
ASPE
is, I'm glad you brought that up though, because ASPE is a summer camp that we have for students on the autistic spectrum. So thanks for the plug for that. That's great. I think that's a really great opportunity for anybody out there who might be interested in coming and exploring Penn College in a really safe environment. So there's that.
Great. So remember that when I say that in the episode.
Yes, exactly. I didn't want to interrupt then. So we have the Transitions Conference happening on campus. And so we've got a number of students, special education students here on campus. So I was just helping out with, there are workshops and sessions. So they have different tracks they can pick. And it's really inspiring. And the one that I was helping with was it was a financial aid session. And it's for students who are considering coming to college. So it was just informative to be in a space where there was such a diverse group of students digesting information in so many different ways. It was really impactful to be there, to hear questions and to hear not questions, but also to know that everybody's just so different. Just the being in that social environment, I think some of us take for granted, like maybe how easy it is sometimes to just go about our day. But, I was asked some questions and it was eye-opening, like maybe some people don't want to open a door because they don't know what's on the other side of it. And you can take that literally or metaphorically, but it's so important when we talk about neurodiversity to just kind of take a step back and realize we're so different from each other. I mean, even if you look at somebody who's very close to you in appearance, or maybe you work with, like we're all just so, so different. And I think that's just like a big takeaway to just remember that you don't know where someone's coming from always. Like they may seem one way, but you just don't know. I don't mean to be vague, but that's kind of what I took away. Just respecting everybody where they are and valuing neurodiversity in your world and just being compassionate.
Yeah, and whether you're coming from a neurodiverse background or you're neurotypical, whatever, I think that means. Again, we're talking about a spectrum, and so I don't think there's this clear line that sits between. So I think we all deal with our own fears, our own challenges, but that having autism being on the spectrum, it does ramp that up, and how much that gets ramped up, like you say, varies between people. And I think we just need a little bit of empathy, step back and say, well, wait a minute, how can I be a champion for someone? How can I be part of that assistance? And I think that's a lot of what Kerry gets into with what we talk about.
How lucky are we to have him on here? It's so exciting. I hope you all enjoy. Welcome. We are here with Kerry Magro. He is an award-winning national speaker, best-selling author, and a role model in the disabled community. And I'm sure I'm missing like at least 5 things.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine. 3's enough.
So I think you have such an inspirational story. At the start, you were a non-speaking individual, and here you are as a professional speaker. So I'd love to get into that whole transformative process and how you got from from there to where you are today. But let's just start. I think it'd be important to tell our audience, what is autism? And I think if you could touch on the spectrum piece of it, I think that'd be really helpful.
Sure. And as we say in the community, if you met one person who is autistic, you met just that. So autism is very much a spectrum diagnosis. It's characterized as a neuro challenge for many in the community. It often revolves around social and communication limitations, which was kind of my story. I was not speaking till 2.5, and it took my parents 18 months before getting a formal diagnosis of autism at 4. And there were a lot of questions and a lot of what ifs. And now we know today that autism is just very, very broad. And every single person you meet who's autistic is going to be completely different compared to the next person you meet.
So you talked about your diagnosis taking 18 months. That seems like an awfully long time. What was that like? I mean, you were young, so I'm not sure how much you remember, but maybe your parents have shared.
Yeah. So it was really, really challenging because when your kid that you love the most in this world has challenges, you want to do everything you can. And that 18 months of uncertainty was definitely heartbreaking for my parents at the time. But that's a common struggle that I see with so many families today. Their wait lists, and so many doctors are just, as we continue to see, autism is more talked about in our communities, leading to doctors having even longer wait lists in some areas when it comes to getting that formal diagnosis. But my parents just tried to stick to what I was good at and tried to stick to my interests, especially at an early age. And even when I started saying my first few words when I was about 3 years old, just really just pushing me as far as they could while waiting for that formal diagnosis.
So do you think because of everybody's, more aware, I think, does that diagnosis take less time now, or it's still an issue?
I think, especially right now in most areas, we are doing definitely a great job when we're talking about technology to help us. I mean, even today, there are apps like Cognoa that are providing individual parents the opportunity to diagnose their children at home, which is really, really exciting, especially when it comes to the diagnosis rate and some of the wait lists being very, very long, being able to find those answers immediately versus having to be on wait lists. So I think we're doing a better job today. But when I was diagnosed, it was 1992. Just everyone assumed everyone who was autistic was Rain Man. And
things have changed for the better.
Yes, for sure.
So a big piece of this, telling your story, is through your writing. You have a number of books out. Let's talk about those.
I had the wonderful opportunity to do a lunch and learn and gain the opportunity to share a little bit about how that actually came about. And I became a peer mentor. And I didn't have a lot of peer role models to look up to when I was growing up. And I felt isolated at times. So I became a peer mentor for kids from the ages of 16 to 24 to help them as they transition to adulthood. And one of my mentees actually said, "Hey, Kerry, I've never read anything from anyone who had autism. So would you consider," and he knew I liked poems and writing essays about my journey, "would you consider writing a book just based on poems and essays?" And I wrote a letter, which I shared at the Lunch and Learn last night, called A Letter I Would Have Written for My Parents When I Was Still Nonverbal. And that started I got so much positive feedback from that, led to me writing my first book when it came out in 2013, became an Amazon bestseller for special needs parenting. And I've been writing ever since. I've written 5 books. I have 2 more coming out within the next 6 months. And it's just a dream come true.
Yeah, that is amazing. And we had the opportunity, Carlos and I were both at your talk last night. And you have another talk here on campus today. We have the Transitions Conference at Penn College. So I believe we have around 300 students from, I feel like 6 counties coming here, and they're doing workshops, and they're special education students. And I'm just imagining what that keynote keynote presentation is going to be like, and the potential you have to impact those students. I'm looking forward to hearing about that.
Honestly, I wish I had something like that when I was growing up. We didn't have any transition conferences. We didn't have any Autism Acceptance Month events. And to be able to give students something that I never did as a kid, it warms my heart, but it makes me really emotional. I've been doing this work for the past 13 years, and I just have to pinch. It sounds cliche, but I have to pinch myself at times because it's truly amazing. And I hope I can leave the students today with just some inspiring thoughts, because often when we talk about the disability community, there's often a lot of emphasis on children, but disabled children will become disabled adults, and we need to be ready for them and support them as much as we can, because the age cliff does end at the age of 21, unfortunately, for a lot of our kids. And we need to provide them with supports, not only now in that transition, but after they age out of high school.
And that's not limited to just the kids, to those who get into adulthood.
Yeah.
These are the parents, these are the family members. Thinking back to last night and the stories that we heard from the participants that were there, I mean, some of it's really heart-wrenching.
Yeah, it's so powerful. I mean, having just a young adult be able to share her own specific story of not even being diagnosed, but like for years wanting to be diagnosed, seeing the signs, but being told no, and having that ignorance out there in the world. I mean, there's so many people, I hope, today during the Q&A period will share a little bit more of their personal testimonies, because that's honestly my favorite part of being a public speaker. I could talk for hours on end, and I know get a lot of yawns during that time. But the Q&A period is just truly amazing, because it is a spectrum, and there are so many beautiful, unique stories. And I hope I could leave the kids today with that. They should always be able to speak up and share their stories to not only make the world a more inclusive place, but also to self-advocate and nurture for their own journeys as well.
Last night, you were sharing some of the numbers about the number of people that are diagnosed, today versus, even when you were a kid. But that's ignoring the whole population, like the young woman that we met last night who is not diagnosed, but there are people that you can clearly see the signs that there is something that needs to be looked at and addressed, and the person is asking for that.
Yeah. So it's actually really funny you mentioned that, because one presentation I've been giving a lot recently, I'm actually giving it in Toronto next week at a keynote with Dr. Temple Grandin, who's a phenomenal autism advocate, called The Past, Present, and Future of the Autism Community. And a few years ago, MIT came out with a study that indicated that based on the prevalence of autism continuing to increase, by the year 2025, MIT believed that 1 in every 2 people in the United States would have a form of autism. And now, even hearing stories like we heard of the young woman's story last night, I think about all of the people who went years without receiving proper supports, and how unfortunate that is, whether it's unconscious biases around disability, a lack of awareness. So it's not even just the autism community, but it's the community at large.
So I think it's important to talk about that diagnosis piece. So I'm sure if I were in that woman's position last night, there's nothing worse than having an issue going to a medical provider and them saying, everything's fine. And you're like, no, it's not, or I wouldn't be here. So what does that, I know you had mentioned services. What advantages does somebody have after they have that diagnosis?
Well, I think the most important thing is that for me, for example, when I found out I had autism for the first time, it was life-changing, because so many things I didn't know about myself, and so many years I thought of myself as an alien, everything became full circle. And I started learning more about why I had things like sensory challenges, why I rubbed my hands together when I heard loud noises or was affected by bright lights. And I just discovered a new part of myself that I never really knew existed. I feel like that's a big part of why we want people to learn about their diagnoses, so they can understand a little bit more about who they are. But also in terms of our young adults and our aging adults as well, reasonable accommodations, what that potentially looks like, not only at colleges like Penn State, but also in the workplace as well, what we could provide them to level the playing field, because the world is not structured in a way right now, at least universally, that supports people with disabilities. We have some groups like disability support services at college campuses that are doing some great work in trying to provide those reasonable accommodations, but we still have a very, very long way to go.
Is there anything a college could do, just generally speaking, in addition to just having disability and access resources available and accommodations available? I'm sure there are 100 things you could list, but are there just a couple off the top of your head?
Well, it's actually funny. In my third book that came out called Autistics on Autism, which is available to check out on Amazon, we actually did a roundtable conversation with 5 professors who are autism experts who have autism-related programs at their post-secondary institutions in the United States. And they were able to share not only online resources available for these students, but also offline, and what they believed every single college campus should do to support people with autism. And one of the things that I brought up last night in my talk, the idea of a student organization for those with disabilities, that peer-to-peer interaction can be so powerful, especially for a kid like me who went to college and felt isolated because I was the only kid going to that university from a high school. So I needed to go out there and try to engage with people. And I just started coming out to my peers about having a disability at that time. It would have been life-changing to have something like that in store, but also considering sensory-friendly ways that we can provide supports as well, from dimmers in our classrooms for individuals with challenges with bright lights, in addition to external noise being lowered for people with sound sensitivity. Also thinking about our visual learners as well, being able to provide closed captioning on all of our videos as well for individuals who might have those challenges and might be visual learners who don't really necessarily take the auditory they're hearing, but when they see it on screen, such as closed captioning, they're so much more able to process that information. So small little things like that make just the most common sense of the world, but definitely could go a long way if implemented.
And they don't seem like expensive things, really, generally speaking. I mean, for the length that you could, or for the benefit, it doesn't seem like a lot of cost involved.
Yeah, it doesn't affect the bottom line, if at all. Maybe just additional 15, 30 minutes of going on YouTube, getting the transcript of the videos and all the other accommodations as well. It's not very time consuming, and it doesn't affect the bottom line for colleges to consider.
What can we do at the faculty level?
I recommend that every faculty member go online and research universal design for learning and really take in the key principles that UDL. Coming back from my background, I received a doctorate in educational technology leadership. And one of the things I learned from doing countless interviews in my qualitative research with professors across the country is the importance of feedback from students. Not only anonymous feedback to help shape our lesson plans, but also to find what their talents are and what their strengths are, and how we could use those strengths of our students to implement our lesson plans in a way that's fun, interactive, and engaging for them. Because, I mean, and I talk a lot about this in K through 12 and the whole structure of Common Core and standardized testing, and how sometimes it goes over some individuals with disabilities' heads. When we really think about that feedback and we really actually take the time every beginning of the academic year and actually ask anonymous feedback, ask questions, I mean, it can go a long way. There is something called classroom assessment techniques, where professors and faculty members today can go online, figure out how to structure these internal feedback from their students. And that's one of the best ways. We need to meet every single student where they are in their development, because it's not only a spectrum in terms of the autism and disability community. You could just say that about every single student who might be coming into your classroom.
So I think your parents were so instrumental in your journey, and there's a huge, huge value in having a support group. So I don't know if you want to talk about that. Everybody is not fortunate enough to have supportive family. Is there anything that those individuals could do if someone's listening and just feels like they just need someone to talk to? They need help. They need to feel like they're part of a community, but they don't have the support.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to speak up. because even what we learned from last night is that we have people in our community who want to support, but to get that support, you need to be open and honest. And sometimes that's really, really challenging. Don't get me wrong. It's like there were literally people tears from so many of the attendees last night when that self-advocate shared a little bit about her story and feeling isolated. I think the most important thing we need to remind these self-advocates is about the importance of sharing your story, because there are people that want help, from the groups like the Sassy group, the small parent group that's being started to help support parents. There are people in our community who want to help. And especially for young people, that's sometimes really, really challenging. I see this so much with things like bullying prevention in our schools, so many people being bullied and not wanting to speak up about that, but then also in terms of self-advocacy as well. I have a quote in the disability world where I say, disability doesn't come with an instruction guide. It comes with a family who will never give up. And I changed that quote several years ago because I was giving a talk to fifth graders. And one of the students came up to me afterwards. I had like the giant meme that said that quote on it at the end of my presentation. And he told me that he had just lost his parents recently. And I know so many parents who leave when their child is diagnosed with a disability at times. And I know so many single parents who deal with a lot of challenges. I think it's really, really important. And that's why I changed it to, it sometimes comes with a family who will never give up. It's really important to have individuals not only speak up, but to find those individuals who might have the most challenges and being able to support them. And understanding like the valedictorians of the world are phenomenal in their own right, but that kid who might have struggled in class who has an IEP, and that he might have just climbed his Everest, and we need to be willing to give them positive praise and support them in any way we can. So speaking up, but also reminding ourselves to really take care of the kids who need the most support.
You just mentioned IEP. Can you define that for the audience?
Sure. So it's called an individualized education plan. And as part of students being diagnosed, they receive an IEP where they can receive accommodations in pre-K through 12th grade before moving on to college, where it would pivot to 504 reasonable accommodations.
You've been very successful to this point. And whether someone might say in spite of, despite of, maybe because of, the challenges that you face, how would you characterize that? And how could anyone really latch on to what they've got inside them to achieve that level of success?
Oh my God. Thank you so much for that. First and foremost, my story is definitely not finished in terms of what I want to do in my life. I still have a lot of challenges and obstacles that I'm still trying to overcome, not only in terms of my own autism diagnosis, but what I'm trying to overcome in my own life. But what I can say is stay grounded. Really take time out of your life to figure out what your strengths are and your talents are, and go after them, because it may sound cliche, but we only have one life to live. And I was telling all the people last night that one of my interests growing up was to become the next Kobe Bryant. So, and I never became 6'7", and I never defaulted the jump shot. So that wasn't happening. But what I can say is just understanding, like, you need that mentality in your life to go after what you want the most, and just strive to be the best version of yourself every single day. And as my final thought to the people last night I talked was that don't let any one thing in your life define who you are, because I know so many people who sometimes get stuck in what defines them, that they don't necessarily put in that effort towards really going after what they want, because they're so worried about what defines them in their own lives. And don't get me wrong, there's some people with some extreme and very difficult challenges, but trying to latch on to what your strengths are, and then figure out how you can shape that into what you want to do in your life, but not only professionally, but also personally as well.
I think too, I know just with some things that I've attempted, it's almost like the harder something is for you to do, the more rewarding. And that also sounds cliche, but like the more rewarding it is when you can accomplish it. It's like, if it was easy, what fun's that?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
it is nice to be able to work towards something. And even if it is that person's Everest, you know, we each have our own individual ideas of what we can accomplish. And like one little piece at a time, right? Like it's a process, it's a journey.
It's a marathon. And I had an old college professor who I absolutely adored, who said, think with the end in mind. And just take that little step by step and just realize that not everything's going to come all at once. It's a process, but there are rewards along the way because of your effort.
I don't recall if you said this last night or if it was in one of the books, if I read it elsewhere. Those that have autism tend to have that focus to be able to go to two things or maybe three things, and that's what they do. That's what they focus on. We find that in high performers, regardless of autism, no autism, is when you have that focus, you vastly increase your chances of succeeding. So would you almost say that's a strength in a way?
Yeah. I mean, even if we look at the history of some of the most successful and talented people in our history, like the Albert Einsteins of the world, a lot of them have been rumored to have characteristics on the autism spectrum, being able to have, for like Albert Einstein, science and mathematics, being able to focus on that for long periods of time. And it can be a very valid strength. But also at the same time, we also need to find those support for those individuals where they're not necessarily, for example, I work with many kids who are great at technology, but then also play video games 8 hours a day. And it's a fine line between having a kid who I know was able to code starting at 8 years old. I know other students who were able to build a computer at 12 years old. And then also the individuals who not only are able to do that, but then also play 8 hours of video games a day. Being able to find that structure is really, really pivotal. It can be a very amazing strength, but it needs to be honed in. And a lot of that comes back to our guardians, making sure that we are giving our kids not only positive reinforcement, but also helping structure their lives so they can go after, hopefully, their strengths turning into careers one day.
So then, speaking of careers and thinking about the workplace, what's the current state of the workplace for those that have autism or are neurodiverse, and what could it look like?
I think one of the interesting things that happened during COVID-19 was we saw a true pivot for many individuals with autism and disabilities being able to succeed in remote work situations. And I think that has encouraged a lot of employers to really consider that as an accommodation. And especially with the kids I've been working with, they've been really succeeding, especially in STEM-related jobs. So we're talking about science, technology, engineering, mathematics, really being able to thrive by having their own internal structure and not necessarily having to come into work, being able to not take public transportation where there might be a lot of sensory stimuli, not necessarily having to do that quote unquote water cooler talk with some of their coworkers, which, can be, challenging for anyone, let alone somebody who has a social communication challenge. So I think we're seeing more companies really trying to pivot towards that, but we're also seeing the ROI benefits today. This is October, which is also National Disability Employment Awareness Month. We've spoken with several companies about tapping into this untapped talent pool with the fact that 1 in 5 Americans do have some form of disability. But unfortunately, those with disabilities are twice as likely to be unemployed compared to their non-disabled peers. While I was mentioning during the Lunch and Learn yesterday that those with disabilities are more likely to stay at a job longer. They're more likely to take less time off from work. And the majority of reasonable accommodations for them in the workplace cost nothing. So what are we doing to tap into this untapped talent pool in our communities today?
I have to ask about Love on the Spectrum.
Oh, absolutely.
A lot of people are fans. So when I told people we were going to have an opportunity to talk to you, it's like everybody told me, I watched that show. I love that show. And I know you were assisted on a number of different films. How did you get into that? And any fun stories about your work? Were you in LA? Did you say?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's fun for a lot of our fans, I think, to think about and just what that might have been like.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I always grew up a big theater nerd. And I was telling during my talk last night, I wanted to grow up to become the sixth member of the Backstreet Boys. So never got there, maybe one day. But what I can say is that theater became such a huge outlet to help me with my social and communication challenges. And I wrote about theater therapy on my blog when I was just 22, 23 years old. And I had a pretty good size following back then. And I had a movie director just reach out to me. It was like, oh, I was reading about theater therapy. I have a character who's going to be autistic in my next film. And this was a film being done by Warner Brothers. And I was like, oh my God, I would love to be involved with this. He let me rewrite the entire script to make sure it was authentic and as representative to the autism community as possible. And then he had me as a consultant. We went through the entire production process together. And I got to meet so many incredible contacts during that time, not only in LA, but New York, that really helped me understand that we were trying to, not only myself, but so many filmmakers were trying to really be authentic and representative to the disability community. So I've been consulting for the past just 12 years now, and it's been an amazing ride to work with Warner Brothers, HBO, Netflix on Love on the Spectrum, which has been truly amazing to see so many of them fall in love and get into their first time relationships. It just melts my heart because that's what I wanted when I was growing up. And now as somebody who has a girlfriend and has kind of figured out that, but didn't at the time, it's great to have a show like Love on the Spectrum to be able to provide that platform for these individuals.
So many people have not figured that out yet.
Oh, true story. Yeah, it's not only autism, trust me.
Was there anything interesting that you would share? Like, was there anything on set where you saw it happening and you were like, no, that would never happen that way, or anything like that?
Well, I think the interesting thing is working with Kian, the director of Love on the Spectrum, some of the speed dating has been interesting to see. In the 2 seasons we've had, there's been speed dating with some of the individuals. And I always have to just remind people that I work with, and I do a sensitivity training with all the crew members of Love on the Spectrum to kind of tell them what to expect, because nothing is staged on these shows. It's all of them sharing their own stories of trying to find love in relationships, being able to understand some of those sensitivities and understand that sometimes speed dating will work, sometimes it won't, and to give these individuals the opportunity to be able to be themselves as much as humanly possible, taking the camera back just a little bit during some of the more pressurized situations, because especially a lot of those dates that they're also on this, the neurotypical individuals, a lot of them, that's their first time ever getting to be on camera as well, along with the cast members. So being able to be mindful and understanding to take their time, be patient, and realize that it might take a little longer to film this, but it's worth the rewards to see those beautiful individuals being able to do something that for some of them, they thought they would never be able to do.
I'm sure the response from the autistic community has been very well received. I'm sure it's been very well received.
Yeah, we're just blown away, and Netflix has been incredibly just amazing. Their publicity team have been going above and beyond to make sure that we're promoting this in many areas as we possibly can. We talked a little bit about the Lunch and Learn. Our second season came out in May. We were in the top 10 shows on Netflix for 3 consecutive weeks, which is like, just in terms of the disability community, we haven't had that much popularity for a show, not only on Netflix, but on a streaming network towards those with disabilities. So it was truly remarkable to see. And hopefully it will give a platform for a lot of autistic individuals to pursue relationships in the future too.
That's so powerful that you had an opportunity to be a part of that. I just think that's so cool. So cool.
Yeah. And we have season 3 coming out in 2025. I just got episode 1 sent to me 2 weeks ago to edit. So
okay, no spoilers.
No spoilers. It was funny last night. One of the parents was like, so can you tell me how many cast members are coming back for this season? I'm like, pretty sure my non-disclosure agreement would frown upon anything of that, but get excited. There'll be some fun things going on.
Okay, stay tuned.
So you've had this it seems like it's just an amazing sequence of events. Like you just don't jump into consulting and being involved in that level of production for a Netflix series. I think it goes all back to that self-reliance and the support that you had, but there's an intentionality there that you've had. Nothing would have happened had you not put yourself out with that first letter that eventually led to the book.
I think it was just my parents also just played a pivotal role. I mean, my mom joined the Board of Education when I was just starting in the special education classroom for the first time because she didn't want me to fall through the cracks in a system that really no one was talking about special education at the time. So, and she spent 20 years there, not only to see me through graduating high school, but to stay to help the future generations. And I think her motivation to support me gave me a lot of self-motivation to support myself, knowing how hard she wanted to see me succeed. At some point, there was just that moment that just clicked and everything became like, oh my God, my mom and dad have just done so much for me. And I've seen myself succeed in some areas. Let's see how far we can push this. And without them, I wouldn't be here today. And I just love them to death.
Oh.
What kind of message would you send to that teen, the preteen that's out there struggling right now, who is not getting that diagnosis?
Just realize that you should always feel free to speak up and realize that your feelings are valid and that you have your own unique, beautiful story. And this is a message we'll actually share with a lot of the high school students today, but you have a beautiful message that needs to be told in this life. So go out there boldly and write it, because for so many of the kids I work with, they don't realize how capable and amazing they are at times. And just getting an opportunity to meet them one-on-one and meet them where they are, I would just tell those preteens, just don't give up and just keep pushing to be the best quality version of yourself every single day, because I have been in your shoes and I know sometimes it's rough, but you have a lot that you're capable of in this life. So keep pushing yourself.
I think we want to talk about what you have coming up. What's on the, I'm sure you have like 100 things. So what are the top couple things you have that you're really excited about that you have coming up in the next few months?
Absolutely. So we're coming into holiday season, and I'm so thrilled to say that I have a new children's book coming out called Santa Goes the Extra Mile for Children with Disabilities, which will be available on Amazon in mid-November, where I've been so blessed to be able to play a sensory-friendly Santa Claus for the past 10 years to give over 500 autistic and special need children, for most of them, one of their first opportunities to ever meet Santa Claus in a sensory-friendly setting. So we actually wrote an entire book about a young boy who goes to the North Pole to meet with Santa to share a little bit about his needs and some of the accommodations that he needs. So Santa could go around the country and provide sensory-friendly events for kids to meet with Santa for the first time. So we're highlighting autism, cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, and over 15 different disabilities. So we could go into classrooms to be able to provide an education for younger students, just a little bit more about disability in our community today. So we're really, really excited about that. And then I am writing for a children's show, which will feature an autistic protagonist, which will also be coming out in November. I can't say the name of it because also NDA, but it's funny how those things work. But I've started doing a little bit of script writing, and I'm getting headshots right now to go back into acting. So that's something exciting as well. But the children's book will be exciting, and then the upcoming children's show as well.
Wow. I can't wait to follow your journey. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thanks for hanging out with us today.
Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Check out our show notes for bookmarks to your favorite sections and links to resources that we mentioned in today's episode.
You can also find past episodes and see what's on deck for upcoming ones at pct.edu/podcast.
And of course, we are open to your thoughts, ideas, and suggestions, so send those over at podcast@pct.edu.
It's been real.
Catch you next time. Here I go. Okay, let's rephrase that.